Okay, 11th and 12th grade, we are back to our regular lectures. I'm excited. I know you are. Haha. Okay, so thank you so much for turning in the books. Those of you who have done that, I really appreciate that. I can grade them all at the same time. I have 4 people who turned them in so far, which means I can do all of that grading in one shot rather than going back and forth on the email. So if you haven't turned your book in and you haven't gotten the new fill in the blank notes and the new homework for the last chapters of the book, please do so as soon as you can. Just stop by the school and they have that for you. I also want to remind you that we are now in May, and that means this is our last month of school. So let's finish strong. Let's get all our work in and finish the school year with a sense of accomplishment. I know it's been a weird school year. Nobody's ever seen anything really like this. Okay, there have been instances in the past where schools and churches and stores have been closed down, but this is different for you. So let's just own what we can do for ourselves. Okay, you guys can teach yourselves. You can do extra work to learn more. I've been teaching you for years. Some of you, for 6 years now, I've been teaching you to teach yourself. Yes, it's important to have teachers. Yes, it's important to have a classroom and a school. I totally get that. I find that is very important for me as well. I went back to college as a grown adult with children, and it really helped being in the classroom, being able to bounce ideas off of people. But you know what? There has to come a time when you look at the vast world of information out there and you have to make the decision that you are going to learn because it is best for you to learn. Okay, so let's finish this up. Let's finish strong. We've got just a few chapters left of this book, and we're going to get through them fairly quickly. So keep up with your homework. Do a little bit every day so that you never get bogged down. And let's get to it, shall we? Let's start with chapter 26. Okay, don't forget that your homework requires you to read your book, because everything in the note isn't necessarily going to correspond exactly with the chapters of the book. So you need to be reading on your own as well. Again, that is self-teaching, and that's one of the things I've been trying to get you to do. But let's start with the lecture today on chapter 26. We're talking about easy credit. Now we're getting into the 1920s. When everything is really going well for the United States. We're in what they call the roaring 20s because of the loud sounds of machinery and cars and everything and music. But things are going to be going really well, but people aren't going to be content with things going very well. They're going to want things to go even better, which on the face doesn't seem like a bad idea. But when you go into debt to make life better for yourself, you're actually digging a hole that it's really hard to get out of. And that's exactly what's going to be happening in the 1920s. So let's talk about easy credit. Credit is short-term loans. Okay, so when you get a credit card, it is a short-term loan availability. So when you pay with that credit card, you're taking out a loan that you have to pay back with interest. Now, credit cards generally have a grace period of 30 days. So let's say, for instance, you went out and bought a phone, a brand new phone. You're very proud of that phone. If you don't pay that phone, you have 30 days to pay that credit bill off without it charging you interest. So it's a great way to build up your credit, because later on when you're going to buy a house, they're going to be looking at your track record for credit and seeing whether or not you can pay your bills on time. So having a credit account or a credit background is very important. It's a good thing. But you have to be careful how you use credit, because again, you're taking out a short-term loan. Here's the problem. If you end up buying a phone and you don't pay your credit card off in that month, pay off that bill, then you have to pay all the money that you just spent for the phone. You have to pay that back plus interest. And credit card interest is pretty high because it's really easy to get that loan. So in order to pay for the convenience of just swiping a card and getting that short-term loan, they're charging you a lot of interest on most cards, okay? Sometimes it's as high as 20 to 21 cents per dollar that you spend. That's a lot. So let's say that you go and you decide you're going to spread those payments out for that phone over a 10-year period of time. Most people don't keep their phones for 10 years. So there's a pretty good chance that you will be long done with your phone before you've ever paid it off. And you end up paying more for your phone because of the interest rates than you ever would have paid if you'd gone in with cash. It's a good thing to use a credit card wisely. Okay, so let's say, for instance, I'm ready to go get a brand new phone. Everybody needs a new phone every few years because the technology updates. So let's say it's been 3 years since I've gotten a phone. It's time for me to get a new phone. My phone's not keeping up with the demand for today's technological demand. So this is what I'm going to do. I have looked at how much money I've been saving up over the last 3 years to purchase a new phone. I have enough money to go in and get the phone, but I choose to use my credit card. I swipe it, I get my brand new phone. Then when my credit card bill comes, I take the money I've saved aside and I use that to pay off my credit card. I've paid for my phone, okay? And I don't have to pay interest, and I've built up my credit. So there are great ways to build up your credit without getting in that hole, okay? But in the 1920s, when people are first really learning about using the short-term loan of credit, the Federal Reserve Bank kept interest rates very, very low, and that made it easy for businesses and individuals to take out loans. That can be a good thing, but it can also be a problem because people get to the point where it's like, you know what, they're only charging me this much interest on this big loan. I'm going to take out more money and more money and more money. But you know what? You have to pay all that money back. And people tend to forget that. Okay, modern advertising came of age in the 1920s and increased consumer demands for products. Okay, this is really when we saw commercials coming about. Okay, we have radio for the first time. And so when we talk about the first commercial radio station, KDKA in Pittsburgh, we are talking about the fact that they have commercials to actually pay for their programming. That's what commercial broadcasting is. You watch commercials. The people who are running the commercials are the ones paying for your broadcasting. But during this time in the 1920s, magazines were huge. That was the big part of culture at the time. We didn't have television. It had been invented, but it wasn't even close to being ready for public usage. Okay, it was just in its very early trial stages. But we had radio, but magazines were the number one way to get your advertising dollar across and make money back on it. So I included a couple of little pictures of 1920s advertising. Most people were still living on farms at this time because food was needed in the city. So people who lived in the cities, they depended on farms to, provide their food for them. That is still true today. Don't pick on farmers. Don't roll your eyes at farmers. Farmers feed you. You be respectful. Okay, so this is for a louse killer. Louse is singular for lice. Okay, so this is a louse killer for chickens. Chickens will lay fewer eggs if they have lice. I guess they're too busy scratching. So this is one of them. This is a disinfectant and germicide. That was it. I've also seen, this is when you start seeing soap advertisements, life insurance advertisements, all these advertisements, and they all kind of look the same because that was the style for the day. Okay, installment plans. This is a new way to use credit, and it's going to be a little different. This is when people paid a small amount at the time of purchase, and then they paid the rest in small monthly payments. But again, people got trapped in this because, for instance, they got a brand new washing machine, brand new from the era. Oh, yeah. Buy a brand new washing machine, they only have to pay $1 a month to pay for that washing machine. And over time, they get to pay that off in a couple of years. And then they look around, they go, you know what? I could also use a toaster. Well, that's only going to cost me another quarter a month. You know what? My friend just got a big radio. I'm going to get a radio too. And that's going to cost me $2 a month. Before you know it, you're paying a lot of money out for a lot of different products. And what happens if something happens, like you get your hours cut or you lose your job? Suddenly you're stuck making all these payments and all of these different appliances and you don't have any money coming in. and that became a big problem in the 1920s. Stock dividends. These were earnings on stocks. People were looking at ways to make money so they could spend more money. So the New York Stock Exchange, this is where people in the United States buy and sell stocks. And people started getting into speculation. If you don't have number 6 on your notes, I apologize. Just go ahead and write it in. Speculation is when you buy a lot of stocks thinking that you can sell them again for a profit. It's the same speculation we have heard of in real estate earlier, where people would buy large pieces of land thinking that they would sell them off in smaller chunks or make small improvements and sell them off more expensively, and thinking that they can borrow money, buy the land, sell off the land, get a profit for the land, which would allow them to pay off their bank loan plus the interest, and then they'd keep the profit. So speculation was being used for stocks as well. People would even borrow money to buy stock, thinking that when the stock succeeded, they could sell the stock, pay back the bank loan, and keep the profit. That was the plan on speculation. I'm gonna do a spoiler alert here. Speculation rarely works. It works for a few people in very controlled situations. There are people who live their whole lives working with speculation. This is not for everybody. And in fact, once everybody starts getting on board with it, speculation is doomed to fail, which is exactly what's going to happen here in the 1920s. Okay, for those of you who are missing, if you are missing number 6, that one word that I'm covering is the. That's it. You're just missing the E. So fill it in. Okay, let's talk about on margin. This is when people paid as little as 10% of the price of the stock in cash, thinking that when the price of the stock went up, they could sell at a profit or pay off their loans. So they're buying that stock kind of a little bit at a time, thinking that when it goes up, I can sell it off at a profit. I can pay off my loan. So they're paying 10% in cash. The rest of it is a loan. Not a good idea. Don't do that. Okay, write that one down. When we talk about a share in a company, that's exactly what it sounds like. You are becoming part owner of a company when you own a share of it. Now, sometimes it's a very tiny share. You may be 1/1,000,000th of a share, you 1/1,000,000th of an owner, or 1,000th of an owner. You don't really have a lot of say when it comes to being part owner of that company, unless you own a lot of shares. Okay, if you own 50% of the shares, you have a controlling interest and you get to tell the company what to do for the most part. Okay, let's talk about inventory. Sometimes you'll go into a store and there will be little tags everywhere saying inventory in progress, and you can see workers out in the aisles counting everything. That's an important part of retail that happens about once a year for most retail outlets. It used to be that stores would completely close down at night, especially, and then they would bring in a team of people who were hired specifically to do inventory to count. It was a great way for people to make a little extra cash. They would do that for a second job for a very short period of time. They'd go in, do an inventory for a store, and then move on. It was a great way to get like a little bit of cash. But inventory is your supply of unsold goods. So anything that's on the shelf is inventory for a store. Anything that's in the back room is inventory for a store. That's all your unsold goods. And stores need to keep track of all their unsold goods so that they know how much they should order in the future and what they should probably let go, especially if they have a lot of one product that just isn't selling. Okay. Now, on Black Tuesday, it was October 29th, 1929. Let's talk about the term Black Tuesday because it's very different from Black Friday, which we celebrate every year. I don't, because I'm not observing Black Friday. Black Tuesday in this case is a bad thing. Okay. It was a dark day. On Black Tuesday, the stock market plunged. Investors lost over $30 billion in 3 weeks, but it all started on October 29th, 1929. Suddenly, all of these people who own shares or, bought on margin, they found themselves with worthless shares and still having to pay back the loans to their banks. So they were kind of stuck because a lot of companies just kind of went belly up all of a sudden. Now, they had been struggling for a long period of time and they were trying to sell shares to get money. It's one of the ways that companies get an influx of cash so they can continue on with their product. But it just wasn't enough, and they didn't have the way to actually get the materials that they needed or to get stuff sent out. And everybody who had these, they were just kind of propping up their companies by, buying shares, selling shares. You had company managers who were using company money to buy shares in other businesses, and this whole house of cards just fell down. It was really unfortunate. Black Friday, however, good day. Okay, it goes back, it gets its origins in the idea of the old-fashioned ledgers, which were, 2 pages. You'd open up your ledger on your desk and you would use black ink for all of your profits. You would use red ink for all of your debts. And so the idea of Black Friday, it's the day, one day a year when all of the companies that are selling products have a chance to get into the black. They're looking at profits. They're trying to make profits. That's a good thing. We want companies to make profits because when they do, they can pay their people more. They can give them bonuses. They can invest in research and development. They can hire more people. That is a good thing. And so a lot of companies have gotten involved with Black Friday because they open early, they have great sales, they encourage people to all come in during a specific period of time, and they are making money hand over fist, and that's a good thing because a lot of stores, especially at Christmas time, hire more people to work those Christmas hours. So that's good for everybody. Okay, although relatively few people actually own stocks, the stock market crash effectively shut off the supply of credit that had sustained the economic boom because there were a few people who were buying on margin, who were borrowing money, and then couldn't pay it back because the stock market crashed. Because of that, all that easy credit just dried up because there was no way to actually make that money. As a result of people not being able to pay back those loans that they had borrowed to buy that stock, more than 4,000 banks failed between 1929 and 1932. That's a lot of banks. And people who had money in those banks lost all that money. It was gone. So here's the cycle that ends up starting the Depression. You have banks failing, people losing all their savings. So people stop buying goods because when you go broke, you can't buy anything. So people stop buying goods. They have to survive on what they have. Businesses who are trying to sell the goods can't sell their goods. So they're trying to get loans to kind of get them through. And they can't get loans, again, because the banks have failed. So this is a cycle that just doesn't seem to really end. Banks failing, people losing their savings, people stop buying goods, businesses can't get loans. I know the notes are really long here, so I'm stopping. Okay. Factories started cutting down on production because these businesses couldn't get loans to pay for the people who are working in their factories. They couldn't pay for the goods to make other goods. That's capitalism, when you use one thing to make another thing or use multiple things to make something. So factories had to cut down on production. They weren't selling. They can't keep making the same amount of stuff. And because they can't keep producing, factories have to lay off workers, or they just cut the wages of the workers. That does happen. We have a congresswoman right now who is laughing at the idea that workers could get their wages reduced. She says, I've never heard of such a thing. And the other people who are in the room are just looking at her like, really? You've never heard about people getting their wages reduced? And then it makes people wonder, do you have any experience in any kind of business at all? And you're working for a country that is primarily about business? But yeah, she just kind of rolled her eyes. I've never heard of such a thing. Workers getting their wages reduced. People get their wages reduced all the time. It's not pleasant, but sometimes it's a choice of either you don't work at all or we cut your wages a little bit so that we can keep the factory going or the production going. Workers with less money, again, if you don't have the money, you can't spend it. They bought fewer goods. It's not even, you can't even say it's a pattern. It's just cause and effect. If I don't have the money, I'm not going to buy as much stuff. Factories that could not sell their goods closed. And guess what? When they closed, all of the people who worked for them were now out of work. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about depression. Okay, people don't have money, they don't have jobs, there's no factories. All of this is because people were gambling with the stock market. That was the primary reason for it. That word that I'm blocking is goods. So you're only missing OODS. Okay. By 1932 and 1933, those were the worst years of the Depression. 1 in every 4 workers were out of work. That's 13 million people were out of work. And when many banks could not meet their obligations, the Federal Reserve shrank the money supply, but it only increased the number of bank failures because everybody wanted to get in and get all of their money out of the bank as soon as possible before the bank failed. Well, that run on a bank, everybody trying to get all their money out, actually caused more bank failures because the bank had no way to lend money, to make money, to pay other people. That's how banks make their money. They use the money that you give to them, that you put into your accounts, and they lend that money out for interest. And then they keep a portion of that interest. You get a portion of the interest. Okay. So it's like they're borrowing your money to lend to somebody else. That's exactly what they're doing. But this is going to increase yet more bank failures, increase the number of bank failures. So if you've ever watched At Christmas Time, It's a Wonderful Life, the main character owns a savings and loan, and there is a bank run on his little savings and loan. And his determination is just to stay open long enough for during the bank run so that they need to stay open long enough so that they can start afresh, really. So they basically beg people, don't try to take all your money out of the bank because that will break us and then it will break you. And not everybody will get their money. We will just let you withdraw exactly what you need for right now. And that's exactly what they did. And as a result, they were able to stay open and continue working with their cash flow. So It's a Wonderful Life. It's a really good movie. It's just really, really long. Okay. 3 reasons can be given for the Great Depression. First, you have the desire of a few to get rich quick. You are always going to have that in every society. There is no way around that. There is no exception to that rule. You are always going to have a desire of a few people to get rich quick. They don't want to put in the work. They just want the cash. They want the money. And when they do get the money, they tend to be very wasteful with it. They're not very smart with the way they spend their money. There was also a widespread practice of buying goods on credit. That is the use of credit cards. They called them charger plates back in the day. Or even just borrowing money from the bank. That would be credit. So the widespread practice of buying goods on credit, but not paying off the bill right away. I told you there's a good way to do credit and there's bad ways to do credit. This is the bad way. Then there was also government interference in the free market economy. The United States government was so frustrated with people just all these businesses closing down that in some cases they told businesses, you have to stay open. And the people who own the business said, we can't stay open. We don't have any money to pay our workers. They said, well, you don't have a choice. You have to stay open. Well, they ended up going bankrupt because they couldn't just fire a few people and say, okay, sorry, we have to let you go so we can keep the business open for the rest of the people. No, they had to keep everybody in until they were completely out of money. So that's government interference in the free market economy. And that's not a good thing. The economic disaster spread because we are trading partners with the world. So our economic depression spread to Europe, Japan, and throughout the world. So it's a worldwide depression. see how much time we have. Okay. Herbert Hoover. He had a good background in politics, but he kind of came in as president at the time when people were really kind of spending money willy-nilly. They were doing some really bad business practices. And so when he became president, he called for a return to sound credit. That means credit that makes sense. You only borrow what you need and you pay it back right away instead of just charging everything on there. And he wanted sound banking practices because a lot of banks were using the customer money instead of lending it out to other customers and getting a return that way. They were using some of the customers' money to go buy stocks, hoping for, they were speculating too. Banks were speculating. Hoover also felt that families, churches, charities, and neighbors should look after the needs of the unemployed. At first, you had some people saying, you know what, the government needs to take care of us. Well, it wasn't a lot of people. It was very few people who actually believed that. But they were, starting this new idea of, well, we're American citizens, so the American government should take care of us. Herbert Hoover said, no, we've never done that before. What are you talking about? That's not the way it is in the United States of America. People have families. So if one person becomes unemployed, the rest of the family basically takes them in and helps them find new work. And they all work together to bring money in for their family. If you need extra help right away, your church, your local church will help you out. Our local church helped us out a great deal when we were unemployed. We were unemployed for about 9 months at one point. And we had a 5-year-old and an 6-year-old and an 18-month-old baby, and we were out of work. So we did jobs around the church. We worked for other church people in our church family, and we did odd jobs wherever we could. We cleaned out a lot of garages, trimmed trees. We did whatever it took to get a little bit of money. And then there was even a time when I was working as a nanny for a teacher at the school at the time. And our pastor, the previous pastor, he came to me and he said, can I have your car keys? And I said, sure. And I handed him my car keys. I didn't even ask why. I'm just watching a couple babies. And I went out to my car at the end of the day and it was filled with food. I mean, absolutely stuffed with food because our church family took care of us. They made sure we had food on our table. So that was the way churches worked together. They helped each other. And they also hooked people up with jobs. Charities, if you weren't a church member or if your church had a lot of poor people, you could have a charity that might help you with paying some of your bills or helping you find a place to live. Neighbors took in neighbors and helped them. People looked after the needs of the unemployed because they cared about the people in their lives. And the government, frankly, doesn't. The government doesn't care about you. They care about your money. That's your tax money that you're sending in. Now, they will care about you to the point where they want the nation as a whole to be happy and healthy and have the right to pursue their own brand of happiness. But when it comes to you as an individual, no, they don't care about you. The people in your life, the family members, your church, charities, neighbors, they care about you. Hoover had been called the great humanitarian after World War I because he had supervised the relief of millions after World War I. He had set up government programs to feed the people who absolutely needed it after World War I. But he's looking at this as a president, looking at the nation and saying, we don't need that same kind of oversight. We have people, charities, churches, families who can take care of the people. You don't need government oversight for this. At this time, soup kitchens, bread lines, and shelters sprang up. Whoa, sorry, I don't know what happened there. To meet the needs of the poor. Now, some people look at this and go, well, wasn't this government? No, this was not government. Soup kitchens were run by charities and churches. Same thing with bread lines. Same thing with the shelters. Those were run by charities and churches, and they helped people. You notice these men, most of them are dressed very nicely. Okay. Some of them are people who have helped to support the soup line and the bread lines. Others are there to get a bowl of soup and some bread before they go look for a job. That's their whole goal. They're not going to get a check and then stay at home. They are going to go out and try to get a job. And it won't be easy. Okay, we are going to stop right there. We made through the first 20. Okay, made it through the first 20. Wow, notes. Okay, and then I'm looking here, and I'm going to tell you right now, we are not going to take a long time to get through this. We only have 60 notes on this first lecture. So we're talking 3 days at the most. I doubt it's going to take us that long, honestly. So do a little bit of homework every day. You will notice in your packet that you got from me, there is no test review. There's not. I'm not going to do them because we are getting down to our last month. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to average the grade of all of your homework, and that will be your final test grade. Okay? So that means don't blow your homework. Don't leave blanks. Read every question carefully. Make sure you're using your critical thinking skills that I've been trying to drill into your heads for years, some of you. Make sure you read every option before you answer, because sometimes you're going to have a multiple choice where it's just 2 answers or 1 answer or 3 answers. Make sure you do your absolute best. Never, ever, ever leave blanks on any test ever. Please. Okay. Now that I've, I didn't threaten you, but I'm just telling you, I'm just reminding you, please, please, please do your absolute best on all of your work. Do some learning on your own. And I will see you again tomorrow, because we are going to get together every day except for Wednesday. I need that day to do like grading and to catch up. And I figure you guys could use a day a week to do some kind of catch up as well. But it's good to be talking to you again. I'm glad we're almost finished. We really don't have a lot left to do, and I'm excited about finishing strong. And I will talk to you guys again tomorrow.